This is the book. It's called The Pima Indians, and it's written by Frank Russel in the year 1900. Now, books like these are anthropological texts. What they really are is the federal government paid an anthropologist, in this case, Frank Russell, to go to an Indian reservation or an indigenous community and to learn and document every possible thing about that given culture. Everything from the language to stories to texts to, well, actually, we didn't have a written language back then. And pretty much everything about our culture is found in this here book, supposedly. Now, this is what I want to point out. All of this is like, this is supposed to be my culture. Do you want to know how long of a description clothing is in this book? Let me show you. Let me show you. Literally one paragraph. All of this anthropological work, clothing, traditional clothing, comes down to one flippin' paragraph. Let me read her for you, okay? The description of Pima clothing need not be long. Throughout fully three-fourths of the year, clothing for protection is quite unnecessary in that region, and that worn in winter was of the simplest character. The history of Pima clothing may be divided into four periods, namely, the first, in which natural products, little modified, were employed; the second, in which native textiles were introduced; the third, in which more or less remote imitations of Mexican costumes were in vogue; and then the present period, when very plain and serviceable clothing is purchased from the whites. So, according to this guy, two-thirds of my people's clothing is imitations of other cultures. The inaccuracy of it all. Ugh. So, let's rewrite that. Actually, let's add to that. And that's really what I kind of want to do, because that is the basic, this is what white society has to say about the clothing my people wear. One little paragraph, half of which is really saying that we imitate other cultures. That's not accurate in the least. And that's one of the things I want to do today. Let's talk about that. So, this is what I think about myself and other indigenous people. I am an ancient person living in a contemporary context. My heart, my spirit, everything about me is made for a former era. And but I'm here in this time and in this period. I'm grateful for the juxtaposition because it aids in the decolonization process, and it also gives indigenous people the opportunity to redefine our actual culture, because anthropologists like Russell, like this guy, have been trying to tell us who and what we are for literally a century. This is supposed to be the anthology of my culture. My culture is thousands of years old, and you really think you're gonna fit thousands and thousands of years worth of information, of lives lived, of lives lost, of surviving several apocalypse in less than 500 pages of text? You cannot summarize an experience so vast. It's nearly impossible. It can only be experienced and taught and shown, and that is one of the things that I wish to do. I was maybe 14 the first time I read that passage, and I thought it was such an insult because I know that our traditional clothing has a lot of depth and meaning behind it. And so really what my work is, it I'm not accurately called an historical sewer. I are an historical seamstress like other women are, or other people are in this community, in this sewing YouTube community. What I actually am is a prehistoric seamstress because I use aesthetics that date back before history, because history as it is understood, especially in regards to indigenous folks, is how we relate to the European American experience. What is considered historical is about 1500 or so, or whenever Columbus sailed the ocean blue, when the Spaniards finally found us. Technically speaking, according to European American standards, that is when my history began. That's not true at all. My people have been here since time immemorial, since we are considered one of the most ancient tribal groups in the continent. And it is because of anthropological findings and archaeological digs and parts of my community that we have been able to prove we have been here for several millennia. And to be quite honest, our oral history dates back to the creation of the earth itself, just like a lot of other groups of people. And so, really, our clothing is much more complex than just four different phases. It's actually probably more like 50 something, because we have examples of our clothing from ancient times. We have examples of our clothing in historic times, like the 1600s and the 1700s. We have those. And so let's explore them, shall we?